Today, we're going to immerse ourselves in an utterly mysterious topic, the final battle on Earth, also known as the Battle of Armageddon, which focuses none other than on Israel. It seems that God has intentionally directed the entire world's gaze towards this nation, and from what we see, Israel is not going to leave this spotlight that only seems to be increasing. But before we delve deeply into this analysis, how about you subscribe to our channel and tell us from where you're listening and how you're feeling today? Now, as we well know, Israel is immersed in a constant battle and unceasing turbulence with the Palestinian people. But to truly understand who the Palestinians are and how this conflict has reached its current point, we need to look back to the times of the Old Testament. There is a key point that we must keep in mind before venturing into this story. God promised the Israelites, His chosen people, that even when He judged them in the last days of the Old Testament, He would continue to be their God and would return them to their homeland, Israel, in the end times, just before Jesus returned to establish His 1,000-year kingdom. Since the Jewish people were expelled from Israel in 70 AD, God has managed to preserve their homeland so it doesn't transform into another state, country, or nation under the rule of various populations that have occupied it throughout the centuries. Astoundingly, it was only in 1948 when the Jews officially declared the State of Israel, being recognized by other nations, which shows that God fulfilled His original covenant promise with the Jews made in the Old Testament, to bring them back to their homeland in the last days. Israel, sharing borders with Lebanon to the north, Syria to the northeast, and Egypt to the southwest, was created in a region previously known as Palestine, the Holy Land of the Bible. Our story begins with Moses, who freed his people from slavery in Egypt. After wandering for 40 years in the desert, Moses and everyone over 20 years old were unable to enter the Promised Land. Then, Joshua and Caleb led the next generation into the Promised Land, corresponding to the area of Palestine, originally known as the Land of Canaan, inhabited by the Canaanites. Joshua led his people through this land, defeating and displacing the nations that occupied the lands God wanted to grant them. After settling in the Promised Land, the Jews formed a tribal confederation and established the biblical kingdoms of Israel and Judah. Later, the Kingdom of Judah was formed, and since then, the biblical kingdoms of Israel, Judah, and Judea were the only independent and sovereign states that ever existed in Israel-Palestine. Surprisingly, no other group of people has managed to establish a state there since the Jews were expelled in 70 AD, when the Romans conquered the region. Palestine became a province of the Roman Empire. Later, with the fall of the Roman Empire, the region passed into the hands of the Byzantine Empire of Christian faith. But the winds of change blew again in 638 AD, when an Arab Muslim caliph conquered Palestine, wresting it from the Byzantine Empire and annexing it to an Arab Muslim empire. During this period, many inhabitants of Palestine converted to Islam, although the land never officially became a state or country, even under Muslim rule. In a new twist of events in 1099 AD, European Christian crusaders took over the region of Palestine. Despite this conquest, the Crusaders also failed to establish Palestine as an official state or country, instead using the region more as a military base. Then, Palestine went through the hands of Syria, and subsequently, was controlled by the Ottoman Turks. World War I brought more changes. After the defeat of the Ottoman Turks, the British took control of Palestine, temporarily governing it under the League of Nations. However, it is fundamental to highlight that through all these power exchanges and occupations, Palestine never officially became a state or country. Fast forwarding to around the 1850s, Jews began returning to Palestine in small groups. At that moment, the land was quite arid, desolate, and seemingly unattractive. The Jews who returned to Palestine were not disheartened by the desolation of the land. They began to cultivate the land, making it bloom and prosper again. This return and the reactivation of the land are undoubtedly an interesting and vital chapter in the region's history. The cause of the land being so desolate for a period is that, curiously, no other country or people had decided to claim it as their own. Without a sense of ownership and care, the land was left uncultivated and not utilized to its full potential. But when the Jews returned and the land began to prosper again, others, including Arabs from neighboring Middle Eastern nations, also began to migrate there. This convergence of cultures and the transformation of the land began to sculpt the history we know today. It is common to hear that Palestinians accuse Jews of displacing them, but the historical narrative is somewhat more complex. During the 1850s, Jews returned to Palestine and revitalized the land through their agricultural efforts. Arabs, on the other hand, began to return afterward, attracted by the prosperity that the Jews had brought to the region. As the 1850s unfolded, other people, including Arabs, began migrating to the region, creating a rich tapestry of cultures. However, both Jews and Arabs became the main inhabitants of this metamorphosing land. When World War II broke out in the 1930s, more Jews sought refuge in Palestine, and after the Holocaust, many Jews from all over the world decided to emigrate there. At the end of World War II, this complicated and varied history had already sculpted the demographic landscape of the region. In the 1940s, Jews, longing for security and independence, returned to Palestine, their ancestral land. However, during the same period, many Arabs were also returning. On May 14, 1948, the State of Israel was officially declared, and the Arabs who now lived there came to be called Palestinians, claiming the land as theirs and not the Jews. Tension escalated after the formation of Israel, and the Palestinians, supported by Arab nations such as Egypt, Iraq, and Jordan, began to oppose the newly formed State of Israel. The Jewish people, however, remained determined to establish their state in their historical homeland. Tensions between Israelis and Palestinians continue to this day, making the conflict one of the most prolonged and controversial in modern history. It's crucial to underline that from the perspective of prophecy, God always intended for the Jews to return to their homeland before the return of Jesus Christ, indicating that we are indeed living in the end times. God promised that when they returned, Israel would be the focus of worldwide attention and contention. Thank you so much for diving into this history and prophecy with me today. Don't forget to leave a comment below and tell me your thoughts about the current state of Israel and what it could mean for end-time prophecy. If you find this topic intriguing, make sure to share this video with your friends and family to provide them with a historical perspective of this captivating narrative. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more insightful discussions. Stay safe, stay curious, and God bless you.